you rate French pop music? Déchiré non ganile, devant rien, les feux non chevilés, en perdant, te rimer tranquille, un matin, j'aurai tous ces cris brûlés dans mes mains. You want to know what that's all about? It's torn our rags, rascals, shackles at our ankles, far, far away. You laugh, but be quiet. One morning, I will have all that glitters in my hands. And in fact, I did, by chance, come to have all that glitters in my hands because I inherited a little car, sort of thing I'd never buy. I must say, it was remarkable. In fact, it took me completely by surprise. And if the French aren't very good at pop music, the other thing they're not very good at is making sports cars. Except, sometimes you think, where the hell did that come from? Talking about was a little Peugeot, a 205, except it was a thing called a 205 GTI. In fact, the one I inherited was a CTI, and that was the this silly advert here. It says "soak the rich," presumably when you haven't got the hood up when it's raining. But it was a remarkable little car, and God, it went like hot shit off a shovel. And it was great fun to ride up and down, and it was the nearest car I'd had to my Lancia Fulvia, and that's saying something. In fact, it reminded me very much of that, except at traffic lights and things, it seemed to sort of annoy people, especially drivers of BMWs and GTI VWs, and even something called a Triumph Dolomite Sprint at the time, which was billed as being a BMW eater. Can you believe that? And I was seen as a boy racer in this thing. I never thought about that. So it's just, a little Peugeot 205, and it's got a bit faster engine that. But it really stood for something for people, and I didn't realise that because it wasn't my sort of area of interest at all, really. Anyway, one day I had to go down to London. I was living in Shropshire at the time, and so I took this CTI 205 Peugeot into the station at Stafford Station, and I left it there in the car park, and I went down to London to interview somebody called Hans Feuerbusch. He was a German Jewish painter who had escaped Hitler just before the war, and he was in his 90s when I interviewed him, and his work had been forcibly put in the Degenerate Art exhibition by the Nazis. And of course, to show how ridiculous modern art was, well, of course, as soon as the Degenerate Art exhibition was put up and people said it's degenerate art, you can imagine they were lining up around the block to see it. Rather, if you said, we're going to, this record, it's going to be banned, so you can't buy it from next week, well, everybody would go and buy it, wouldn't they? And I could have told them that. And of course, it was the reason was, of course, whether people understood the modern art, whether they didn't. The main thing about it was that it was interesting. It wasn't boring. A bit like you know what? looked up and down in the car park, couldn't find the car anywhere. And eventually I told the station, they called the police, and the policeman came out and he said it's obviously been stolen. I said, has it? He said, oh yes, what was it? I said it was a 205 GTI, I think. He said, well, he said, all the boy racers around here want those, you know. It's the #1 car for being nicked. I said, what happens to them? He said, well, they drive them around and then they don't want to get nicked themselves, and they usually drive them off into the river, like the Severn or the lake or something like that, and you never see them again. And I thought, well, you know, it's a bit like the advert at Soak the Rich, literally in that case. But all I can say, of all the cars I've had, this is one of the least boring, and it was unassuming, and it was the one that I missed the most.